He was closeted homosexual the entire time, you know, and I know that pain. I watched it. I saw him live it.
For years, whispers surrounded the legacy of Rudy Ray Moore. Mysterious rumors that were never confirmed until now. His family is finally pulling back the curtain, and it turns out the real man behind Dolomite was even more complicated than the wild character we saw on screen. Behind the flashy rhymes and kung fu kicks was a man struggling financially, emotionally, and socially. Moore was something he never publicly discussed. And in the 1970s black entertainment scene, that secret carried weight. His family now confirms that hiding his sexuality was one of his biggest burdens. It isolated him, forcing him to channel everything into the Dolomite character, which became both his armor and his prison. You think you know Dolomite? Think again, because behind the laughs was a man fighting battles nobody ever saw.
Oh, the Dolomite is my name, and fucking up motherfuckers is my game.
Rudy Ray Moore was born in 1927 in Fort Smith, Arkansas, during a time when life for black families in the South meant hard work, little pay, and even fewer opportunities. His parents were strict and religious. His mother especially tried to raise him in the church, hoping that path would steer him clear of trouble. But even as a kid, Moore was different. As a teen, he left Arkansas and made his way to Cleveland, Ohio. Like many black families during the Great Migration, he was searching for something bigger. Cleveland gave him his first real taste of the stage, but it wasn't enough, so he moved again, this time to Milwaukee, where his talent started to take shape. He worked in retail jobs by day, but at night he transformed into something else, a performer, a hustler, and a man trying to carve out a lane in a world that didn't make space for men like him. Milwaukee became his training ground. His early gigs weren't glamorous, but they taught him how to command a room. That's where Prince Moore was born, his first real stage character. The way Moore used storytelling and rhythm even then was ahead of its time. He blended jokes with music and added raunchy bits in ways that still had people clapping in church pews. That tension became a theme in his life and work. But Moore wasn't just a dreamer, he was a grinder. When Moore joined the U.S. Army in the 1950s, people thought he'd fade into the background. Instead, the Army became the place where he found his real voice. Assigned to a special entertainment unit, Moore traveled across Europe performing for troops. That's where he earned the nickname Harlem Hillbilly. Stationed in Germany, Moore sharpened his timing. He learned how to feel out a crowd. His routines mixed singing, dancing, and monologues full of character voices and punchlines. He started experimenting with rhyme schemes and delivery, almost like spoken word, long before hip-hop ever existed. This was more than entertainment, it was survival. Moore knew that being funny could keep him safe, keep him sane, and maybe one day make him famous. He didn't just want to be another guy in uniform, he wanted to be the guy on stage. What's wild is, even back then, you could see the seeds of Dolomite starting to grow. The crude jokes, the pimp swagger, the street smart storytelling, it was all bubbling under the surface. When he got back to the States, he wasn't the same man. He had a mission and the world wasn't ready.
Dolomite is my name. And fucking up motherfuckers is my game.
After returning from the Army, Rudy Ray Moore kept performing in clubs, grinding day and night, still chasing that spotlight. Eventually, he found himself working at Dolphins of Hollywood, a well-known record store in Los Angeles. It wasn't the stage he wanted, but it kept him connected to music and to people, especially the ones most folks ignored. And that's where he met Rico. Rico wasn't a star. He was just a street guy who hung out near the store. He talked like a character, full of made-up adventures, cursing and rhyming about hustlers and life on the streets. What caught Moore's attention wasn't just the content, it was the delivery. Rico could hold a crowd with nothing but words. People stopped to listen, laugh, and cheer. Moore knew he was hearing something special, but instead of copying it, he did something smarter. He brought Rico to his home, gave him some drinks, some weed, and let him talk. While Rico told his stories, Moore recorded every word on tape. Then he went to work, polishing those raw tales, shaping the character, adding his own style and delivery. Out of that came Dolomite, a larger-than-life street hero who was tough, clever, foul-mouthed, and unforgettable. Moore took Rico's stories and made them theater. He started performing them at nightclubs, and the response was immediate. The crowds loved it. Moore wasn't just doing comedy, he was performing street poetry. The character was funny and gritty, and he was something that mainstream entertainment didn't have. Dolomite was a raw black expression without filters. Moore then recorded full comedy albums in his apartment. He'd invite friends over just to laugh in the background so it sounded like a party. Albums like Eat Out More Often, This Belongs to Me, and The Dirty Dozens weren't sold in regular record stores. They were too explicit. But that didn't stop them from spreading like wildfire in black communities across the country. He was banned from radio. TV wouldn't touch him, but his tapes were passed from hand to hand like gold. Moore had tapped into a hidden lane, a space where people wanted to hear something real, something funny, and something unapologetically black. By the early 70s, Moore had a loyal fan base, but he wanted more. He had a vision to bring Dolomite to the big screen. The problem? No Hollywood studio would touch it. The idea of a kung fu fighting, foul-mouthed pimp wasn't something they were willing to back. But Moore wasn't waiting for permission. He used his own money, nearly all the earnings from his comedy albums, to fund the movie himself. That included hiring local talent, building sets, and doing things completely outside the Hollywood system. The budget was around $100,000, 0 cents, and every cent counted. Moore didn't have access to big-name directors or actors, so he found people who believed in his vision. Dolomite was released in 1975, and it was nothing like what audiences were used to. The story was wild, the action was outrageous, the language was raw, but it worked. People showed up in droves. In theaters across black neighborhoods, folks lined up to watch Dolomite curse out the bad guys, fight with kung fu moves, and take back his turf with his crew of fierce, street-smart women. It became one of the top blaxploitation films of the decade, a genre where black filmmakers took control of their stories and made movies for black audiences. Dolomite wasn't just a character, he was a symbol, a street hero who talked like the people, dressed like the people, and stood up for the people. But not everyone loved it. Some critics slammed the film. They said it reinforced negative stereotypes, black men as hustlers, loud, and they worried that instead of fighting stereotypes, Moore was feeding them. But Moore pushed back. He always said Dolomite was meant to be entertainment, not a moral lesson. He called it storytelling based on black folklore and oral tradition. And for many fans, that's exactly why it worked. Dolomite was a fantasy, one where the underdog wins, where the system doesn't break you, and where being raw and real is enough to save the day.
Rudy Ray Moore lived in the closet for many, many years because he was running around talking about, and whatever his records would be, and he was closeted the entire time, and I know that pain. I watched it. I saw him live it as we traveled the country, and he'd be on stage and the women are screaming and Dolomite, and he was not into women. And today, to see the LGBTQ community as strong as it is, and everybody holding their head up high, I watched this great artist have to live like Liberace and Rock Hudson and that life, and nobody wanted to say it.
Even with all the cheers and laughter Rudy Ray Moore created, life behind the scenes was far from easy. The boldness and flash of Dolomite didn't come with a safety net. While his films and albums were hits in the underground scene, Moore still struggled financially for most of his life. He funded everything himself, and that meant constantly risking his personal savings just to keep his dream alive. There were no big studio checks, no endorsement deals. Moore had to hustle constantly just to stay afloat. Touring small venues, selling records out of the trunk of his car, and doing local shows were all part of his grind. Decades after Dolomite had already become a legend, he was also never fully embraced by Hollywood. Despite his cult following and influence, mainstream media rarely gave him credit. He was left out of the larger conversation about pioneers in comedy and black cinema. This isolation hurt not just his career, but his personal sense of worth. He knew he had contributed something real, but he watched others rise while he was often overlooked. On top of that, Moore kept much of his personal life private, but family members have recently opened up about how hard things really got. There were tensions within the family, strained relationships caused by his nonstop focus on the hustle. While Moore was busy building his legacy, those close to him sometimes felt pushed aside, and it wasn't until much later in life that he tried to reconnect those bonds. His health was another private battle. Moore was quietly dealing with diabetes and other issues for years, but he kept it to himself. He didn't want to seem weak. He wanted the world to remember Dolomite, not Rudy, the man behind the curtain. Toward the end of his life, he moved into assisted living, not because he wanted to, but because he had to. Recently, Moore's family confirmed many of the long-whispered rumors. The financial stress, the loneliness, the sacrifices. They said he never let the world see his struggles because he believed the show had to go on. Even in pain, he performed. Even when forgotten, he created. And now, they're finally ready to share those hidden truths. Not to rewrite his story, but to complete it. For years, Moore kept smiling, but now his family is revealing what that smile was hiding.
First and foremost, he's very, very funny. And his movie started off like, if you watch a Rudy Ray Moore movie, his movie started off kind of like, they were kind of stoner pictures. They were kind of movies people would smoke, and then they would like look and say, hey, look what he just said. Look. Or he'd throw a punch and he missed by a lot in the punch. Or the microphone, and you could see the microphone come in the shot. So stuff like that.
When Eddie Murphy took on the role of Rudy Ray Moore in Dolomite Is My Name, it wasn't just a tribute, it was a rebirth. For many people, especially younger generations, that movie was their first introduction to the man behind the myth. And Murphy didn't just play Moore, he honored him. The film brought Moore's story back into the spotlight and finally gave him the recognition that had been missing for decades. It reminded the world that Moore wasn't just a character, he was a pioneer who did it all on his own terms, even when no one believed in him. Moore's family says he would have been proud of how far his legacy has reached. They believe he'd be smiling, not just at the renewed attention, but at the fact that his story's finally being told in full. Not just the wild stories, not just the jokes, but the real man behind it all. He may have passed in silence, but his voice is louder than ever. If Rudy Ray Moore inspired you or made you laugh, drop your favorite Dolomite quote in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories just like this.